Growing up adopted, I always tried twice as hard to prove I belonged in the Anderson family. At 32, I thought I had secured their love through years of being the responsible son. That fantasy shattered when my $20,000 vanished from our shared account to bail out their biological son, Jake, again. When I simply asked for my money back, my adoptive mother, Sandra, screamed words that still haunt me. "You ungrateful little nothing. We should have left you where we found you." Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from today. Drop a like if family betrayal has ever broken your heart too. I was only 5 years old when my birth parents died in a devastating car accident on Route 26. The memories I have of them are fragmented like pieces of a shattered mirror. A warm smile from my mother. The rough stubble of my father as he hugged me goodnight. The smell of fresh baked cookies on Sunday mornings. Then suddenly they were gone, and I was alone in the world. The Andersons adopted me 6 months later. Sandra and Richard seemed kind, if a bit reserved. They already had a biological son named Jake, who was 3 years older than me. I remember the day they brought me home to their suburban house, with the white picket fence. Sandra had prepared a room for me with blue wallpaper and a small bed. "This is your home now, Nelson," she had said, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. From the beginning, there were subtle signs that Jake held a special place in their hearts that I would never reach. When birthdays came around, Jake would receive brand new video games and expensive toys. I would get practical items like clothes or books, or sometimes hand-me-downs from Jake. "We need to be practical with our money," Sandra would explain when she saw my disappointment. "Besides, you should be grateful to have anything at all." I decided early on that if I couldn't earn their love naturally, I would work for it. I threw myself into school bringing home straight-A report cards while Jake struggled to maintain C averages. I joined every club I could, winning academic competitions, and even securing a spot on the debate team that took me to nationals in my junior year. Richard would nod with approval at my achievements, but the celebration would always be muted compared to when Jake scored a single goal at his soccer games. The pattern continued through high school. Jake started drinking at 15, coming home past curfew reeking of alcohol. Sandra would scold him briefly before making excuses about boys being boys and just a phase. When he wrecked the car they bought him for his 16th birthday, they replaced it within a month. Meanwhile, I saved for 2 years working at the local grocery store to buy my first used car. College further highlighted the division in our family. Jake dropped out of community college after 3 semesters, having barely attended classes despite Sandra and Richard paying his full tuition and giving him a monthly allowance. When it was my turn, they offered to help with state university tuition, but I was expected to cover room and board and all other expenses. I worked 30-hour weeks while maintaining a 4-point GPA in computer science. After graduation, I secured a job as a software engineer at a respected tech company, while Jake continued bouncing between minimum wage jobs never lasting more than a few months at each position. By this point, the pattern was clear, but I still held on to hope that one day my adoptive parents would see my value. When I was 28, I made what I now recognize as a terrible financial decision. Sandra and Richard had helped me with college, and I wanted to show my gratitude. We opened a joint account where I would deposit money to help with family expenses. "This way, we can all support each other," Richard had said, patting me on the back. I believed this meant I was finally being accepted as a true Anderson. Around this time, Jake met and quickly married Brittany, a woman who seemed to encourage his worst traits. She did not work, citing vague health issues, and together they developed expensive tastes despite having no stable income. They would show up to family dinners in designer clothes, talking about exotic vacation plans, all while living in an apartment that Sandra and Richard subsidized. I watched with growing concern as Jake and Brittany maxed out credit cards and took out loans they had no intention of repaying. "They are just trying to find their footing," Sandra would say, when I gently expressed worry. "Not everyone can be as naturally disciplined as you, Nelson." There was always the implication that my responsibility was somehow less impressive, because it came easily to me when in reality every responsible choice I made was deliberate and hard-won. Little did I know, this was just the foundation for the betrayal that would shatter the illusion of family I had desperately tried to maintain for nearly 3 decades. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning in April. I was saving for a down payment on my own apartment, tracking my finances carefully as I always did. When I logged into my bank account, My heart stopped. $20,000 had been withdrawn from the joint account 3 days earlier. Money that represented countless overtime hours and careful budgeting suddenly gone. I called Sandra immediately, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Did something happen with the joint account? There is a large withdrawal I did not make. Her response was casual, almost dismissive. Oh, yes, we needed to help Jake and Brittany. They were about to be evicted, and there were some other debts that needed immediate attention. I was going to mention it at Sunday dinner. The casual way she mentioned taking my money without permission left me speechless. I took a deep breath before responding. That was my money for a down payment. You should have asked me first. Well, it is a family account, Nelson, she replied, a new edge to her voice. And family helps family. Jake and Brittany were in trouble. I swallowed hard and tried to be reasonable. I understand they needed help, but that was $20,000 of my money. When can I expect it to be repaid? The silence on the other end of the line was telling. It had never occurred to her that repayment would be expected. Sunday dinner that week was tense from the moment I arrived. Jake and Brittany were already there laughing with Richard about some reality TV show as if nothing was wrong. Sandra was in the kitchen preparing her usual pot roast. No one mentioned the money. Finally, during dessert, I brought it up directly. I wanted to discuss the money taken from our joint account. I need to know when I can expect repayment. I was planning to use that for my apartment down payment next month. Jake snorted, nearly choking on his apple pie. Repayment? Are you serious right now? Sandra put down her fork with deliberate slowness. Nelson, that money went to prevent your brother and his wife from being homeless. I think you can wait a little longer for your apartment. My brother has been preventing himself from being homeless for the past 15 years with your money. I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. I have worked for every dollar in that account. I just want to know when I can expect it back. Brittany jumped in, her voice shrill. You owe this family everything, Nelson. They took you in when no one else would. They gave you a home, an education. The least you could do is help your brother out when he needs it. The least I could do. As if I had not spent my entire life trying to pay back a debt I never asked for by being the perfect son. As if my adoption was a transaction where I would forever be in the negative. I have helped, I said quietly. I have never complained about the different standards Jake and I were held to. I have contributed to this family consistently. All I am asking is when I can expect my money to be returned. Sandra's expression hardened. We do not know when we can pay it back, Nelson. Jake has some promising job opportunities coming up. When he gets on his feet, we will discuss it. The same promise I had heard for 15 years. Jake was always about to turn things around, always on the verge of responsibility that never materialized. I left dinner early that night, stunned by their attitude. Over the next week, Sandra sent text messages that grew increasingly hostile, calling me selfish and ungrateful. Richard remained mostly silent, his few texts, suggesting I should be the bigger person and remember what family really means. When I tried again to have a reasonable conversation about repayment the following weekend, I arrived at their house to find Jake and Brittany pulling up in a brand new SUV. The price tag dangling from the rearview mirror indicated it cost nearly $40,000. Nice car, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Good to see my money is being put to good use. Jake shrugged. Mom and Dad co-signed the loan. We needed reliable transportation. Later I discovered Sandra and Richard had not only signed as guarantors, but had also put down a substantial deposit on the vehicle. This while claiming they could not repay what they took from me. That day, the simmering tension finally boiled over. I stood in their living room, the place I had tried to call home for so many years, and firmly stated, I need my money back. You took it without permission. That is theft regardless of our relationship. Sandra's face transformed with rage, like I had never seen before. Her carefully maintained appearance of suburban motherhood dropped away, revealing something ugly and primal. You ungrateful little nothing, she hissed, stepping toward me with clenched fists. We should have left you where we found you. Do you know how many troubled children we could have chosen? We picked you, and this is how you repay us. The words hit me like physical blows. In all our years together, the fact that I was adopted had rarely been mentioned, so bluntly used as a weapon against me. Richard, who had remained silent through most conflicts in our family, finally spoke up. If you put money before family, then you are not a real Anderson. Never have been, never will be. From the corner of my eye, I could see Jake smirking with satisfaction. He had always resented sharing his parents' attention with an adopted sibling. Now he was watching me being put in my place, reminded of my status as an outsider. A real Anderson. I repeated, a lifetime of suppressed resentment rising in my throat. Is that what Jake is? Someone who takes and takes, never contributes, and expects to be bailed out of every bad decision. If that is what being a real Anderson means, then you are right. I am not one of you. The argument escalated quickly, with years of hidden feelings surfacing like toxic waste bubbling up from a buried dump. Every instance where I had been treated differently, every time Jake's failures had been excused while my successes were minimized, every dollar spent on him that had been denied to me. "Get out of my house," Sandra finally screamed, pointing at the door. "If you cannot appreciate what we have done for you, then you do not deserve to be here." Richard stood beside her, arms crossed. Jake and Brittany watched from the kitchen doorway, making no attempt to hide their enjoyment of the scene. I looked around at the family photos on the walls, noticing for the first time how few included me compared to the dozens featuring Jake at various ages. This was never really my house, was it? I was just a guest who stayed too long. I left that night with only the clothes on my back and the few possessions in my car. I checked into a hotel shaking with adrenaline and grief, unable to process what had just happened. The family I had spent nearly 30 years trying to please had discarded me as easily as an outdated appliance. The next day I drove back to the house to collect my remaining belongings. What I found shocked me even more than the previous night's confrontation. All my childhood possessions had been thrown into black garbage bags and piled on the front lawn. Books, photographs, trophies from debate competitions, my high school and college diplomas, all tossed out like trash. Jake and Brittany watched from the living room window as I loaded the bags into my car, occasionally laughing and pointing. The curtains were drawn when I looked directly at them, but I could see their shadows moving behind the fabric. That night in my hotel room, I sat surrounded by the garbage bags containing the physical evidence of my life with the Andersons. The pain was unlike anything I had experienced since losing my birth parents. This second abandonment cut even deeper because it was deliberate, a choice they had made to punish me for standing up for myself. But amid the devastation, something else was forming resolve. For the first time in my life, I decided to put myself first, instead of seeking their approval. I contacted an attorney the next morning to discuss my options for recovering my stolen funds. The attorney confirmed what I already knew: taking my money without permission was theft, regardless of our family relationship or the joint nature of the account, since all funds had come from my paychecks. We filed a police report that afternoon. Word spread quickly in our small town. Former teachers reached out in support. Neighbors who had watched me grow up expressed shock at the Andersons' behavior. Even Jake's former friends contacted me, sharing stories of how he had borrowed money from them over the years without repayment. While the legal process moved forward, I focused on rebuilding my life. I found an apartment within my new reduced budget and moved in with the few possessions I had salvaged. My coworkers helped me furnish the basics, and for the first time I created a space that was truly mine, not one where I felt I had to constantly prove my right to exist. The court case was straightforward. Bank records clearly showed the money had come from my paychecks and had been withdrawn without my consent. The judge ordered full restitution, plus interest and court costs. The Andersons' shock when faced with real consequences was almost comical. They had never imagined I would stand up to them this way. As the bailiff escorted them out, Sandra turned to me with tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to your family?" For the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty or obligated to fix her pain. "You made it clear I was never really part of your family," I replied calmly. "I am just acting accordingly." That moment of standing my ground, of refusing to accept the role of grateful, perpetually indebted adopted child, was when I truly became free. 3 months passed with no contact from the Andersons. I focused on my career, earning a promotion that allowed me to start rebuilding my savings. My new apartment became a sanctuary, decorated exactly as I wanted, without considering anyone else's preferences. For the first time in my life, I was living entirely on my own terms. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, the first message from Sandra appeared on my phone. "Nelson, we miss you. The family is not the same without you. Richard and I have been thinking about what happened, and we want to make things right. Please, call us. No apology, no acknowledgement of the theft or the hurtful words. Just the expectation that I would come running back at the first sign of acceptance. I deleted the message without responding. My circle of support had grown during this time. Coworkers became friends who invited me to weekend barbecues and movie nights. I joined a community basketball league and started volunteering at a local coding academy for underprivileged kids. These people valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them or how well I performed the role of grateful adopted son. A month later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Jake and Brittany had faced foreclosure on their house. Without my money to bail them out, they had finally experienced consequences for their financial irresponsibility. They had moved in with Sandra and Richard, creating tension in the household that had never existed when I was the one walking on eggshells. Then Richard had a minor heart attack. It was not serious, but it prompted a new wave of reconciliation attempts from Sandra. Calls, texts, and even handwritten letters arrived, each more emotionally manipulative than the last. Richard might not have much time left, one claimed. Do you want to live with the regret of not making peace with your father? I maintained my boundaries, responding only once to suggest that Richard focus on reducing the stress caused by supporting 2 additional adults in his home rather than worrying about me. 6 months after the court case, Sandra showed up at my workplace, tears streaming down her face as she waited by my car in the parking lot. Nelson, please, she begged as I approached cautiously. We made a terrible mistake. We want you back in our lives. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse rather than just regret over losing my financial support. Sandra, I said, using her first name deliberately, I have forgiven you for my own peace of mind, but forgiveness does not mean I have to allow you back into my life. Her face crumpled. But we are family. Family respects boundaries, I replied. Family does not steal. Family does not throw someone's childhood memories onto the front lawn. You made your choice, and I have made mine. As I drove away, I realized I felt compassion for her, without feeling responsible for her happiness. It was a new sensation, this freedom from obligation, and it lightened something inside me that had been heavy for as long as I could remember. The grief for the family I thought I had came in waves over the following months. I mourned not just the recent betrayal, but the decades of conditional love and subtle rejection. I allowed myself to feel the pain instead of burying it beneath achievement and people-pleasing as I had always done before. During this time, I started volunteering at a support group for foster children, aging out of the system. Sharing my experience helped transform my pain into purpose. These young people faced the same fears and insecurities that had driven me to accept mistreatment for so many years, and I could offer them perspective I had gained at great personal cost. 6 months after Sandra's workplace visit, I encountered her at a grocery store. She looked older, the stress of the past year etched into the lines around her eyes. We stood awkwardly by the produce section before she spoke. Jake and Brittany moved out last month, she said. Richard and I realized we were enabling them. We told them they needed to stand on their own feet. I nodded, surprised but unwilling to show it. That sounds healthy for everyone. We had to sell the house, she continued. The medical bills from Richard's heart problems and the money we lost in the court case. We could not afford it anymore. For a moment, old guilt tried to surface, but I pushed it back down. Their financial problems were the result of their own choices, not my refusal to be their backup plan. I understand now, Sandra said, her voice breaking slightly. We never treated you the same as Jake. We expected you to be grateful just for being adopted while we gave Jake everything without expecting anything in return. It was wrong. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I had received. Yes, I agreed simply. It was wrong. We parted with a tentative plan to meet for coffee the following week. When the day came, I brought a small box containing duplicate copies of childhood photos I had salvaged from the garbage bags. You can have these, I told her. I kept the originals. Our relationship now exists in a carefully managed middle ground. We meet occasionally for brief conversations. Richard sometimes joins quieter than before, seemingly humbled by the events of the past year. Jake and Brittany remain distant, having moved to another state after finally facing the consequences of their actions. I will never again be the desperate for approval young man who allowed his self-worth to be determined by people who could not see his value. The pain of betrayal transformed into a strength I never knew I possessed. I learned that family is not defined by blood or legal documents, but by respect, consistency, and love without conditions. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who cannot see your worth. And sometimes the most powerful form of forgiveness is creating boundaries that protect your peace, even as you wish others well from a distance. Do you have experience with family members who only value what you can do for them? How did you handle that situation? Comment below with your story. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength after betrayal. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is not selfish, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is never determined by those who failed to appreciate you.